If you're watching this video, then you're probably thinking about moving to Ashburn, Virginia. And while doing your research, you uncovered a lot of mixed things about living here, and you're not quite sure what to believe. Well, in this week's video, I'm breaking down the 10 most common myths about living in Ashburn, and we're gonna find out if these myths are true, completely false, or land somewhere in the middle. And you're not gonna wanna miss it, so let's dive right into it. Boom! Hey everybody, it's David, your favorite realtor. So I've personally been living in Ashburn since 2017. And over the years, I've heard so many myths about what it's like to actually live here. And most of these myths actually come from locals who live in other parts of Northern Virginia. In fact, I believed in a lot of these myths before I moved here, but after living in Ashburn for 9 years, I realized that some of these myths are true, some are completely false, and some land somewhere in the middle. So let's get it started with the first myth about living in Ashburn with too much traffic. So yes, traffic overall in Northern Virginia is absolutely terrible, especially during rush hour on the major commuter routes. In fact, USnews.com ranks the DC Metro as having the 8th worst traffic in the nation. However, traffic in Ashburn is almost non-existent, very minimal at worst. In fact, there's very little traffic in Loudoun County as a whole. Now, there are a few spots in the county that will get backed up during rush hour, but really not in Ashburn. And this is definitely one of my favorite parts about living here. Literally, during 5 o'clock rush hour, I can drive from one end of Ashburn all the way to the other in about 20 minutes. Now, to put that into context, I can make the exact same drive on a Sunday morning, and the timing is gonna be very similar. Now, once you leave the Ashburn area, then traffic is a complete different story, especially as you cross into Fairfax County. And then you will experience the true traffic in Northern Virginia, and it gets worse as you get closer to DC. So the myth about too much traffic in Ashburn is busted. Now, the next myth is Ashburn is too expensive. So Ashburn is actually located in the wealthiest county in the nation, and in my mind, an A+ area to live and raise a family. However, this comes at a price with the high cost of living, especially with the high cost of housing and the high cost of daycare. And this is by far the biggest con and challenge to living here. Now let's look at housing. So the median sales price of a home in Ashburn comes out to $780,000. Now let's compare that to Northern Virginia as a whole, where the median sales price is $710,000. So Ashburn homes are 10% more expensive compared to the region as a whole. Now let's look at single family homes, and the median sales price of a single family home in Ashburn comes out to $1.1 million. Now, oddly enough, that number is actually $5,000 less compared to the exact same time last year. But with that being said, $1.1 million for basically the average single family home, that is a lot of money. In fact, I remember when I first got in the industry back in 2014, you could buy a beautiful 4,000 square foot single family home in Ashburn for under $625,000. Wow, what a time to be alive. I really wish I could go back in time and buy a single family home. And then you don't get much relief when it comes to renting as well, as the average rental in Ashburn comes out to $3,400 per month. So whether you're buying a $780,000 house or you're renting a house for $3,400 per month, that is a lot of money and the biggest con to living here overall. So yes, housing in Ashburn is extremely expensive, but you can still find some great value, especially with townhomes or townhouse style condos for well under the median sales price of $780,000. Now let's talk about daycare. So if you have kiddos under 5, well, you're gonna need daycare, and this is definitely gonna become your highest non-housing monthly expense. So I have a 2.5-year-old toddler in daycare, and this is by far my highest non-housing monthly expense. And when I share with you how much my wife and I pay per month, you literally may turn this video off and decide I'm not moving to Ashburn. So my wife and I pay $2,300 per month. You know, when my friends and family were pushing my wife and I to have kids, they failed to mention how expensive childcare is. And not to mention that $2,300 per month is pretty much par for the course. As when I was doing my research trying to find a school for my daughter, I literally called the 15 closest daycares to my house, and they're all in that $2,100 to $2,500 per month range. Now, to put this into context, the national average daycare rate is $1,372 per month. So my wife and I are basically paying $1,000 more per month compared to the national average. But the good news is it's only 3 more years until my daughter starts kindergarten, which will be free. But of course, I'm sure there's some new monthly expense that I'm not foreseeing that'll be coming my way. So the myth of Ashburn being too expensive, unfortunately, is confirmed. Now, as much as I love making YouTube videos about living right here in Northern Virginia, what I love even more is helping folks just like you relocate to the area. So if you're even thinking about moving to Northern Virginia, reach out to me, give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email. Just know I got your back when you move into Northern Virginia. Now the next myth is Ashburn is too far away from DC for commuters. So the basis of this myth is you can't work in Washington, DC and live in Ashburn. Now, depending on your specific situation, you absolutely can. However, with a few caveats, let me explain. So Ashburn's about 32 to 36 driving miles away from Washington, DC. And during rush hour, that 32-mile drive is not going to be an easy drive whatsoever. So expect your commute during rush hour to be 60 minutes on a good day and up to 90 minutes on a bad day. So if you have to work in your DC office 5 days a week, then living in Ashburn is probably gonna be too far away because that daily commute is gonna wear you down fast. However, if you're lucky enough where you only actually have to go in the office 3 days or less per week, then living in Ashburn is 100% doable. So let me share with you a real world example. So as I mentioned earlier, my wife and I live here in Ashburn. However, her office is in DC and it takes her anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes to get to and from the office, depending if there's been any major accidents. Now the saving grace is she only has to go in the office once a week, twice max, so it's definitely very doable for her. However, if she all of a sudden had to go in the office 5 days a week, then we would have to consider moving closer to DC. And if you've been watching my YouTube channel these past 5 years, then you know there's no way on earth I'm leaving Ashburn. Now you also do have the option of taking the metro from Ashburn into DC. Now you're not gonna save time whatsoever. However, you'll save the aggravation of being stuck in bumper to bumper traffic, less wear and tear on your car, and you can get a head start to your day and get some work done on the train. So depending on your specific situation, living in Ashburn and working in Washington, DC is 100% doable, or you may want to consider living in other parts of Northern Virginia. So this myth lands somewhere in the middle. Now the next myth is there's nothing to do in Ashburn. Now this is probably the case 15 to 20 years ago, but not so much anymore, as there's a lot of fun activities to do in Ashburn, and when you add the surrounding areas, that gives you even more fun things to do. First, you have One Loudoun, which is the downtown of Ashburn, and it's a lifestyle mixed-use community that features shops, restaurants, corporate offices, and entertainment options. And there's something here for everyone. First, One Loudoun is a great place to go for happy hour with coworkers. It's a great place to go for date nights. My wife and I actually live in One Loudoun, so we go to One Loudoun all the time for our date nights. Plus, it's a great place to go for celebration dinners or even grabbing a milkshake with the kiddos. Also in One Loudoun, you have iFly, which is an indoor skydiving company that gives you the experience of free falling in a vertical wind tunnel. Now, I'm yet to go here, but it's definitely on my list. Then you have Top Golf, which is an entertainment venue that combines golf with interactive games, food, and socializing. Now, unfortunately, you will not catch me at Top Golf. It's an awesome venue, but unfortunately, I'm literally the worst golf player in Northern Virginia. I literally can't even hit the ball. It's so embarrassing. Then you have parks and recs all throughout Ashburn, including the brand new Ashburn Rec and Community Center. And this new rec center just opened in July of this year. And this is gonna be a 2-story facility featuring a 50-meter competition pool, a leisure pool, basketball court, fitness areas, an outdoor playground for the kiddos, and a lot more. And then you have the wineries of Loudoun County. And if you didn't know this, Loudoun County is actually known as DC's wine country, featuring more than 40 wineries. And hands down, the most popular winery you're gonna find is Stone Tower, which is right next door in Leesburg. And this is a great place to go on a beautiful Saturday afternoon when it's like 70 degrees outside. Go there with your friends, family, drink some wine, cheese and cracker boards. It is a great time overall. I don't even like wine, but I love going to the wineries of Loudoun County. So there's so many fun activities and things to do in the Ashburn area. And I can do a full video on this topic alone. So the myth of there being nothing to do in Ashburn is 100% busted. Now the next myth is Ashburn is only for families. Now without question, Ashburn's an A+ area for families. And there's no other town I would want to personally raise my family in than Ashburn. Now, if you are a 30-year-old single professional, let's say working in the Tysons area, and you're looking to meet people your own age and be in walking distance to bars and restaurants, then you're probably not going to want to live in a suburb like Ashburn, as the majority of the population in Ashburn is going to be families. And most young professionals, they choose to live in more urban areas like Reston or the Arlington, Alexandria area. So I'm 43 years old now. So back in my 20s and early 30s, there's no way I would live in Ashburn because I want to live as close to DC as possible. I want to be close to restaurants, bars, and other people in my age group. So while this area is very family oriented, recently I've noticed an uptick of young single professionals moving to the Ashburn area. And I think some of the reasons for this is the opening of the Ashburn metro station, more affordable housing options, especially compared to living closer to DC. And there's a lot of things for younger people to do now in this area, especially compared to 15 years ago. So this myth is not confirmed or debunked, kind of lands somewhere in the middle. However, with the rapid growth we're seeing in the Ashburn area, I believe in as little as 5 years from now, this myth will 100% be busted. Now the next myth about living in Ashburn is HOAs are not worth the monthly dues. So you may not know this, but 99% of all the homes in Ashburn are going to be part of some sort of association, whether it's a homeowners association, a condo association, or sometimes even both. So if you're coming from an area where HOAs are not as common, this is definitely going to come as a shock. Now I will agree, most HOAs that you find here in Northern Virginia are not worth the money. But this is not the case with a lot of HOAs you're going to find here in Ashburn. So the average HOA dues that you're going to find here in the Ashburn area are in the $115 to $215 per month range, and they can get as high as $481 per month. And we're going to talk more about this here in a second. So this is what you get for your money. First, HOAs take care of common ground maintenance. Now I know you're thinking, who cares? But go drive around neighborhoods like Willisford and Belmont Country Club, and you will see how beautiful and well maintained the common areas are. Then you get services like trash and recycling, and then some HOAs give you access to amenities like swimming pools, fitness centers, basketball courts, tennis courts, walking trails, and a lot more. So if the only amenity you ever used was a community gym, well, that alone will save you anywhere from $50 to $100 per month by not having to pay for a gym membership. Now I want to circle back to the HOA that I mentioned earlier. That's $481 per month. And that neighborhood's called Belmont Country Club. And this is by far the highest HOA dues that you're going to find here in Ashburn. But for that $481 per month, you actually get quite a bit. So first you get full lawn and landscape maintenance, so you never have to worry about mowing your lawn. You get cable television up to 75 channels, high-speed internet, trash and recycling, plus you get the safety of living in a guarded, gated community. Then you get access to resort-style amenities like pools, tennis courts, basketball courts, soccer fields, and you get access to the golf clubhouse. And at this clubhouse, you can go for dinner and drinks, or you can even host events there. Now I know nobody likes paying an HOA fee, especially if you're relocating from another part of the country where HOAs are not as common, but it's gonna be unavoidable when you're living in Ashburn. But at least a lot of these HOAs, you get some sort of value for your money. So the myth that HOAs are not worth the money is absolutely busted. Now the next myth is everything in Ashburn is brand new. So Ashburn is definitely a much newer area in our region, especially when you compare it to Fairfax County and Arlington County. In fact, just 40 years ago in 1985, Ashburn was a small farm town with only a population of 200 people. In 1985 wasn't that long ago. So about 90% of all of Ashburn, including the infrastructure, has been built since 1990. Also, Ashburn has seen a lot of massive growth these past 15 years, including new homes, newer master plan communities, and new developments like One Loudon. So 40% of all the homes in the Ashburn area were built after the year 2010. Now, if we compare that to Fairfax County, which is right next door, only 5% of Fairfax County homes were built after 2010. So yes, Ashburn is definitely one of the newest areas in our region, but not everything is brand new or even built in the past 15 years, as you can still find many homes that were built in the late 80s and early 90s. So this myth is busted. Now the next myth about living in Ashburn is data centers are everywhere. So data centers are these big buildings designed to hold computer systems. In fact, Ashburn is often referred to as Data Center Alley because it has the most amount of data centers in the entire world, and 70% of the world's internet traffic travels through Data Center Alley each and every day. Now, the majority of data centers that you find in Ashburn, they're relocated in a square mile area with very little residential properties close by. So you don't have to worry about buying a home and looking directly at a data center from your backyard. Now, there will be some exceptions to the rule. So yes, there's definitely a lot of data centers in Ashburn, but with the majority of them being in the same location, data centers are going to have very little to no impact on the quality of life you find here. In fact, the only time I even think about data centers is when I'm mentioning it in one of my videos. So the myth that data centers are all over Ashburn is absolutely busted. Now the next myth is Ashburn is completely crime-free. Now, while Ashburn is known for being a safe area with a low crime rate, no communities can be completely free of crime. That literally does not exist. So the majority of the crimes that I hear about are property crimes like stealing Amazon packages from your front door and vehicle break-ins. Now, thankfully, I've never experienced packages being stolen from my front door or someone breaking into my car, but I definitely hear a lot about these crimes. Now, when it comes to crime and safety, you must do your own research, but I can say this from my personal perspective as someone who's lived there for 9 years. My wife and 2-year-old toddler can walk by themselves anywhere in Ashburn and I have nothing to worry about. I definitely can't say the same thing for the rest of our region. And on top of that, I've personally never felt unsafe, not even once my whole time living in Ashburn. So yes, without question, Ashburn is probably one of the safest places I've ever personally lived, but it's not gonna be completely crime-free, so this myth is busted. Now the next myth is, everyone in Ashburn is rich. So you may not know this, but a lot of locals nickname Ashburn, Cashburn. So the nickname Cashburn, it comes from the high cost of living, upscale homes, and affluent lifestyle you find here in Ashburn. Also, the nickname Cashburn really refers to how living here you can burn through money quickly due to the high cost of living. And it definitely doesn't hurt that Ashburn and Cashburn rhyme. Also, this nickname comes from the wealth you find here in Loudoun County. So every year since 2007, Loudoun County has ranked as the wealthiest county in the entire nation in terms of median household income. So yes, Ashburn is one of the most highly educated and affluent areas in the entire country, but not everyone's rich, not even close. In fact, when I moved to Ashburn in 2017, I was just scraping by and as far away from rich as you can possibly get. So this myth is busted. And if you want to continue your research, check out this video right here. I share with you the top 5 neighborhoods for living right here in Ashburn, Virginia, and you're not going to want to miss it. And I'll see you in the next video.